you may be happy on the outside, but then deep inside, I like to call it like natural predisposition, right? When you just know that something is wrong. When the world began, there were these rules and they never changed. No, rules are made by people. So the same way people can make the rules, people can break the rules. We need a bigger mission. When you have a bigger mission, you are able to give up your vice. But if you don't have it, then why should you give it up?
Hi, this is Sifu Slim, author of The Aging Athlete. In this book, you're going to get to hear about two different groups of former high-performance athletes. One group, which is made up of 90% of the former athletes, does not do physical activity on a regular basis and tends to suffer the consequences of a sedentary lifestyle. The other group, which is made up of 10% of the former athletes, is doing physical activity on a regular basis and tends to thrive through the aging process, or at least has a better chance at coping with the aging process. We could have taken these folks to a lab and done all kinds of tests on them. Instead, we slowed them down and sat them down and asked them, in their own words, to describe why they're wired the way they are, so that we all, former athletes and non-athletes, can use some of their inspirational and motivational and mindset lessons in our own lives. I hope you pick up a copy today. You can go to theagingathlete.com, and when you have a chance to read it, I'd love to hear back from you to find out what your thoughts are on the stories of these aging athletes. Hi, I'm Sifu Slim, and I'm coming to you live from Reno, Nevada. I've been here for a little more than 20 days, and it's been a great adventure. I'm watching things change. This area is in a big transition. Lots of people from California are being pushed out of California because of many things: the expensive lifestyle, the overcrowdedness, the taxation, the difficulty in starting businesses, difficulty getting into universities, lots of homelessness, lots of crime, and it's still a beautiful place to live. So it's just in one of those periods where a lot of people are leaving and they're coming to places like Reno, Nevada, and other parts of Nevada where life is slower and life is less costly and less crime. However, when you bring 100,000 people from California, which happened this past year, you're going to see if that continues. And my guess is this place will become a Sacramento, a place where I lived for about 13 years. This will be a Sacramento within 10 years. I hope it doesn't, but that's what I think is going to happen in this area, just because of the law of supply and demand and those other things I mentioned about California. So across the seas, across the land and the seas is Ayoub. And tell us where you are and tell us what you're up to, Ayoub.
Thank you, Sifu. So I'm Ayoub. I'm currently in Bologna, and now it's getting really hot here. So yeah, I mean, not my favorite, let's say, season of the year. I prefer it when it's a bit colder. But yeah, I mean, it's okay. It's okay. We can manage it.
So today, based on our conversation last time, we were going to talk about happiness from birth until death. And I'm going to ask Ayoub to lead us through the progression of things that we can talk about around that subject. We hope you all enjoy it, and we hope you give us a like and a subscribe. And remember that treat this like radio. You don't need to watch our faces for an hour, but you could listen to it from time to time when you're cooking or driving or whatever you're doing, and see if this speaks to you. See if this gives you some information that's enjoyable, informational, entertaining, and gives you some messages that you can use and you can share with others. And that's basically what we're hoping this provides you.
So let's start. I mean, I will start from the beginning. So basically, when we are talking about happiness, so what is happiness to you? Let's start from there.
Okay. So The older I've gotten and the more I've studied, the more I started to think about the biochemistry of happiness, the biochemistry of sadness, the biochemistry of desire. There's a great book about the botany of desire, and you can look that one up and watch the documentary about that. And you'll find that if you study these things, that it's really about brain impulses. Of course, there's an open heart, an open mind. There's a connection between others. There's the idea that you have actual thoughts in the conscious mind of things that have worked well in the past or may not have worked well, things that you want to share with others, ways to avoid pushing their hot buttons, as we say, and enhancing the lives of other people and thereby enhancing your own life. And that's a great way to go through life. But in my formative years, before I was in my mid-20s, let's say, I was doing lots of learning and lots of discovery. I used to think about happiness as the feeling of happiness. And I didn't know what it was all about, but I knew what I liked and what I didn't like. I knew what was made me afraid and made me have anxiety and made me thrive. And, I thought about those things. But the biochemistry is something that once you understand it, I think the more you do, the more you'll realize that happiness has a lot to do with biochemistry. And a great person on this subject is a person who's had a lot of anxiety and stress in his life and has had health problems because of that, but has never wavered in his goal to be informative and to use his intellectual abilities, his caring heart, to go out and teach to other people and to examine hard topics and come at them in a very intellectual and informative and scientific way. And that man is the person in the scientific world I think is the most brilliant person since television began. And there are a lot of people who've developed weapons of war and spacecraft and those types of things. I think for the science of how humans and animals behave, this person may be in your mind, but he is in my mind, the leader in the field of intellectual and scientific ability. And his name is Robert Sapolsky, Sapolsky. And he's been a professor at Stanford, and he's done research on baboons in Africa. I think he did it for 28 or 30 years of his summers. And he's an incredible guy to listen to. Lots of content on YouTube of Robert Sapolsky.
What makes you happy?
Doing the right thing is tied in first place with, I just had it, let me remember it. Oh, learning. Okay, learning and doing the right thing are tied in first place for me. So thanks to Robert Sapolsky and even getting an email back from him a number of years ago, I've been enlightened. I've been stimulated. I've learned. I've been able to take a look at some things that I didn't know much about and put them in an area where I had much more information and ability, to take that information and build on it and test it and read other people's opinions. So that and doing the right thing, I think, are the two number one things on my list of being happy. And fulfillment is part of that happiness for me. When I know that when I'm learning and when I'm doing the right thing, I feel fulfilled because that's really all I can do is do the right thing. And that could mean many things. It could mean helping other people with their lives, teaching other people, listening to other people. Listening is one of the most important things that we can do, especially for people who have more experience or better intuition or more information or have a more balanced personality. That's something that I've worked on for my entire life. And I feel that now at age 60, I've gotten to a good level of the balanced personality. And we can always do more, but we have to maintain the balance in all the things we do: the mind, the body, the spirit, the karma, and our daily activities. We don't want to do too much in one area and let the other ones be compromised. We really want to maintain balance. And when that's going, your biochemistry knows it. Your gut health know it. Your stress level, your stress hormones, they know that. Your neck is less stiff. Even though I did jujitsu yesterday with some pretty strong and very capable jujitsu people, I was prepared for it mentally and physically and emotionally. My diet my intestinal tract, everything was ready. And I went in and had a great experience. So after all that hard work, I feel wonderful today, and I'm allowing my body with a little workout and a good diet this morning, and then this nice conversation with Ayoub to allow that to sink in and to not go out and push it today in jujitsu, but allow it to regroup. And at age 60, if I don't go back in until next Friday, that's perfectly fine. That works very well for my advancement and my maintenance in jujitsu. And if I don't have any breakdowns, if I don't have any fallout, that's very helpful for me as a human being, because I can function, I can thrive, and I don't need someone else to come wheel me around in a wheelchair or to be rubbing ointment on my back. It's something that I feel good about. So I've done the right amount, and I was prepared, and I took it as an opportunity that I was going to take seriously, but also lighthearted at the same time, and enjoy the good times I had with these people in jiu-jitsu.
You know, something that I mean, I always like to connect the dots and think about like how a variable influences another variable. So one of the things that I've been studying a bit more is, in your opinion, like what's the relationship between comfort, how comfortable you are, and how happy you are?
I asked that very question that you just posed, Ayoub, to one of the most learned people I've ever met in my life. And he was a teacher of French literature, culture, language, and cinema at Sacramento State, also known as California State University, Sacramento. His name was Robert Zakiri, and he was an intellectual's intellectual. He was good at so many things involving thought and information, and he did it in a very caring way, but he also tested us. My gosh, this guy tested us just like a military person, just an instructor, just like the tennis coach, the boxing coach. He tested us to make sure that we could defend our thoughts, our intellectual discussions, our debates, our talking points. He wanted to push us to dig deeper. And he didn't say that he was always right, but he wanted to test us with his thoughts and other people's thoughts against where we were, and how we could come at those thoughts in an informed way with facts and statistics and quotes, etc. So I asked him the question in about 1992 about what you said about, remind me again, I just lost my train of thought.
What's the yeah, let's call it I think in math they call it like relationship between a variable and another variable. So for instance, it's if there is a direct proportionality. I think
Okay.
it's called proportionality. So if a
Comfort.
variable increases,
Yeah.
then another variable increases. So that's
Yes.
direct proportionality.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what's the proportionality with comfort and happiness?
Yes. 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 Comfort. Okay. We tend to think of comfort, historically anyway, with people who had a castle and they had servants and cooks and people who got their horses ready to go hunting and help put their armor on, their servants who help put their armor on, and their wives, their many wives that they had, some of these people, right? And so we tend to think of that historically as comfort. And I asked him about that in 1992. I said, he was talking about rich people versus poor people. He was talking about the facts that wealthy people could go into legal situations very at an advantageous basis because they could afford a legal team of people to help them. They could have a legal team with attorneys, with paralegals, with accountants. They could have this entire team help them, and they may even have known the judge, because a lot of wealthy people know other wealthy people, and they either play golf with a judge or go to parties with a judge. So they've got so much on their side. They may even be investors in the same property or something that this judge is involved in. And I've seen that. So, you folks watching this will know that's true. I've seen it, and I'm 60, and I've seen it since I was 6 years old and knew what influence was. So I asked him about this idea of comfort and wealthy people, and how many wealthy people were unhappy. And I'm going to say two or three more sentences about that. So many of the Hollywood stars who make a lot of money are divorced 4 or 5 times, and they don't always want to be divorced, but it's common that they're divorced. Charlie Chaplin, many marriages, and the list goes on. So many people, and you would think that these hardworking, successful, famous people were happy. Oftentimes, they're really not happy in the unconscious mind and the conscious mind, and the fact that they've got to be on, like flipping a switch on. They have to be on all the time. These top tennis players we watch on TV and on the internet, they have to be on all the time. So anyway, I asked him about these rich people and the fact that many of them are on psychotropic drugs and are in lawsuits and many divorces and people suing them for their wealth, et cetera. And a lot of them have drinking and drug problems too, and other addictions. And so he said offhandedly, "Donnez-moi les problèmes des riches tous les jours." Give me the problems of rich people any day. And so he ended that conversation on, that was at the end of our little 2-minute, 3-minute talk at the end of class. Give me the problems of rich people any day. And tell me if you have any thoughts around that, Ayoub. What was he talking about there?
That's interesting. So he basically wanted rich people problems, he said. I mean, I don't know. I don't know about that. Like, and this is something I was thinking about recently again. I think, like, we are happy when we are learning, right? When we are progressing. But the underlying thing with that is we are solving a problem. So when you learn, it means you didn't learn before. So you solve the problem of, I'm going to put effort in, I'm going to give effort as money, and I'm going to get knowledge as a result. So imagine money and effort, and then a car and the result. I pay money, I get the car. I pay effort, I get the knowledge. And I'm happy. But when this problem finish, since we know that we need a problem to solve to be happy, we may come up with problems that are not worthy problems. That's what I think. So when he said, give me the rich problem, I don't know about that. Like, are you really sure we can think about it even as work, right? I like to think of as there are problems that are boring and there are problems that are worthwhile. So if something in the house breaks, it's like, I have to fix it, right? It's a bit, I have to do it, but it's annoying. But if I need to learn something because it's gonna give me, I don't know, like a competitive advantage, I'm gonna do it. I feel the urge to do it, even though they are both problems. So I don't know about that. I'm not that sure if I would want rich people problems, to be honest.
All right, let me jump back into that one, Ayoub. What he was saying was not that he would want them personally. What he was saying is that life is so hard if you're poor and you're in need of something, you're in lack of something. Quietness, if you live in an apartment with a lot of people living in your place and then a lot of neighbors with a lot of people in their apartments, you often have smoke from somebody's cigarette. You often have their cooking stuff in your place. You often have noise, and you often have the inability of them to handle all of those people. So there could be a fight. You have a lot of people in a small space. The pressure of that pressure cooker living results in fights. It's inevitable. Now there are things that happen outside of the rules. There are, what is the word I'm looking for? There are something against the rules. I'll think of that word in a second. But it's common that when people are together, that there will be fights and disagreements and maybe even a shooting. So if you're in this poor person area, you have a lot of stuff going on that could be difficult. Then you also have the risk of being thrown out of your apartment because of the problems that you're creating there, or your inability to pay. And now you're going to try to find another place historically, or now you're homeless. So those are some of the things that the poor people have. You get in a lawsuit, the poor person in the apartment versus the person or the corporation that owns the place where you're living, or even the government agency that is in charge of that place where you're living. Now you've got to take time that you don't have because you may be working 2 jobs or 3, and you're doing maybe a lot of child care, people care, elderly care. And now you've got to go deal with a lawsuit of being evicted from your place. Now, if you're wealthy, you can just call your attorney. And I know people who do this. They tell me that when I get into a problem, I just call my attorney and I say, handle it. And if the attorney says, well, I'm going to have a team that's going to cost $2,000 per hour in 2023, they go, that's fine. You take it. I want my life. I want to play golf. I want to work on my business. I want to do other things. I want to go hang out in a bar. Whatever that person wants to do, to a certain degree, they can do it because of the financial freedom, the financial flexibility that they have. And that's what I think he was talking about, Robert was talking about, is that when you're poor and you're sick, you're in trouble. When you're rich and you're sick, you can pay people to take care of you, and you can pay for the best treatment you can. It's not perfect, but it's the best thing that you can do. And you can do it because of time and money, whereas a lot of times the poor people are unable to do that.
Okay. I get what you're saying. I thought he wanted like, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Because having the resources means I can decide how the game is played.
Yeah.
I decide the rules. Yeah, I got you. It makes sense. But again, there we may enter another, let's say, subject, which is like the ethical part. Like, okay, I can pay these lawyers, but am I the one who's right? Because before we were talking about fulfillment, right? So fulfillment, it ties to values, right?
Yeah.
So that has because you may be happy on the outside, but then deep inside, I like to call it like natural predisposition, right? When you just know that something is wrong. You don't need like someone to tell you. I think that's when problems, the real rich people problem come from. Because you can play the system, but you know deep inside if that was the right move or that wasn't. Yeah, you might have all the money of this world, but when you eventually, because you eventually will get there, when you eventually start having some problems falling asleep, then we're gonna talk to the doctor, to the psychologist, and they won't say like, okay, just look at your past, what have you done, and I don't know, like ask people to forgive you, or no, they're gonna tell him, you know what, you can just take this pill.
Oh, yeah.
And this is gonna solve all your problems. So we are not gonna solve the real problem. We're gonna just mask it, putting the dust under the carpet.
Yes.
Eventually the dust is gonna be too much, so you're gonna need another carpet, which translated 2 pills, 3 pills, 1 big pill. And then it's a never-ending process. I think that, just in my opinion, that's why then they may end up in drugs and from there, and why people are, I don't know, suicidal, or it needs to come from somewhere. Like, it's not like randomly. I feel like I want to end everything. Like, it has to be a process, right? We get there. We cannot jump. We humans, we think like, oh, one day we are happy and the other day is like depressed. No. There is a process. There is a clear process, and if you just sit down, get pen and paper, what have you done in the last 2 months? What have you done in the last 3 months? You have the map. We have the map. We just need to be like sincere with ourselves, and then the whole picture is clear. But then we get caught up in, I want to do this, I want to do that. And the problem is not solving because those kind of problems just get bigger. That's what they do. It's like a bad plant. It just grows.
Yes, yes. So I got the word, Ayoub, exceptions to the rule. There are always exceptions to the rule. ¿Cómo se dice? Excepciones para la regla, or something like that?
Yeah, eccezioni alla regola.
Excepzione alla regola?
Yes, yes. Yeah, because at the end of the day, laws are made by people. They're not just there like from, like when the world began, there were these rules and they never change. No, rules are made by people. So the same way people can make the rules, people can break the rules. So it's an open game. You just need to know like which variables I can work on. So if I have money, I can, I can play with the rule. I'm not gonna break the rule, but again, it's not like they're not unbreakable because if they were, they will never change.
One thing I wanted to share with you, Ayoub, is functionality. So if we take biochemistry here and we think of our neurology, we think of our gut health. They call it the second brain, the gut. And some people say it's got more nerve endings and more influence on our happiness and our behavior than our brain. So our gut has all of these multi hundreds of millions of bacteria and yeast and all these other substances that we're processing things with that, and we have certain levels of certain good things and certain bad things. And when that's really in sync, and our mind, body, and spirit are feeling that's in sync, and our unconscious mind knows that's in sync, then we really have something. And when that's working, we don't need a pill or a drink or anything from the outside, because that's when we're really functioning, thriving, and I would say happy. And that's what we want to get to. And the way I do it is I try to keep my responsibilities to something that I can maintain. And the last few months, I would say that I'm really pushing the limit on what I can maintain, because I'm on the phone and on the email, in jujitsu, doing workouts, doing cooking, shopping, interacting with people, coaching people, helping the best I can, helping myself. And my naps, which I used to be really good at, are suffering right now. I've got so much going on in my mind with some big things that are happening in my life that I'm not able to quiet the brain and the body and the unconscious mind and conscious mind down to take a really good nap. But I'm doing my restful half hour, 40 minutes every day, but it's not the same as having a nap. But I can't change that like that, and I'm not going to take a pill to change that, because that pill will have side effects. So I'm writing it out. First time in my life this has happened for a long period of time, and I'm going to write that out and see where I get to. But my sleep at the end of the day, which starts between 9:45 and 10:15 right now, is doing pretty well. So I'm running with it, and I'm not running out of energy. So now that I've set that framework, I want to tell you about this person I met who was a former Olympic athlete from the Middle East. He's 85 pounds overweight right now, and he's a big person. And he's got his posture's hunched over. He's got a lot of extra adipose tissue in front of him and on the side of him and in his face. He doesn't look like an athlete currently. He looks like maybe he could have been an athlete 40 years ago, because he's about my age. So let's say he's 65. So 40 years ago, he would have been 25. He looks like he could have been an athlete, but he looks like, if you went to a zoo, you wouldn't see an old gorilla or an old lion who looks like this guy. You would see an old lion who looks like an old lion that looks like he still could do something with his physicality. This guy doesn't look it. But what he's done with his life is he went to the Olympics in a sport representing Egypt, and then he went and little by little, with his work life and his family life, he kept piling on more stuff. And now he's got grandkids and he's got work responsibilities. He works 6 days a week. and he makes money and he buys rental property and businesses. So he's got like 12 or 15 rental properties and businesses. All of those things, you got to make phone calls, got to do emails, you got to go visit them. You have to call attorneys, you have to call contracting workers, you got to call accountants, and then he's got to deal with his expanding family and all of their needs. So and then he has big dinners with his family, and his whole family, he told me, are overweight, even his kids. I don't know about the grandkids. I didn't ask them that. But they just keep filling in more stuff, more food, more responsibility, more family, more activity. Now, that's not uncommon. In the modern era, that's not uncommon. But if you went back 4 generations, you would typically not see people like this because they're still using their bodies and they still have to walk or use a horse and get on a transportation system to get from one place to the other. And it's really hard to do that if you're 85 pounds overweight. And then the other thing is you're burning calories, you're using your body, and you don't have time to sit down and overeat 2 or 3 times a day and then drink these big caloric drinks all day. So what I'm going to suggest is that this guy's lying, not on my standards, on the history of humanity's standards. If he says he's happy, he's lying. But he told me, and I spent 5 hours with this guy, 5 hours. He said I was the longest appointment he's ever had. Longest one-time appointment, because you and I can talk, and he and I did the same thing, and we went 5 hours. And I took a couple of bathroom breaks. We took a walk around some properties together, but we hung out for 5 hours and we got a lot out of it. But me as a coach, I cared and I wanted to learn, and I spent that time. But let me tell you, he told me he's not happy. He told me that he's got a lot of health problems and he doesn't know how to say no and he doesn't know how to plan. So that's my example of someone who may appear to some people that don't know him very well, that know him superficially, to be doing well because of his family, his job, his money, the fact that he was an athlete 40 years ago. All of this stuff, they may think he's doing fine. I would say he's doing normal for the modern human being. He's doing normally, but he's not, in my opinion, happy, and he's not thriving, because thriving and all that happiness, mind, body, spirit, karma, and some more things, daily activity, you can put a lot in there. And that's my way of saying I'd love to help him, but he currently, after 5 hours and a few follow-up emails, he's not ready. He's not ready to do that. Oftentimes, these people will be ready after their 3rd heart attack. They may give it a try. But I would say that it's very unlikely that he'll change his pattern and he'll keep adding on more weight over time until such time as he is disabled or dead. That's my guess.
You know, in let's call it addiction theory. In addiction theory, there is this concept of the, like, let's say you have a youngster, a young person, that he plays video games a lot. Without going into like the whole, let's say, neurochemistry or whatever. The easiest way, which is not always easy, it's for him, like, to stop being addicted to it. So I would say in this case, to me, it sounds like a work addiction, food addiction, consumption addiction. You need something bigger than that. Something bigger, something that lets you say, this is just too important. So I will give this up. Until that doesn't happen, then you are good with your situation. So in the case of, let's say, a heart attack, so that will be like, I value my life more than over-consuming. So the fear of death will make me change. But until I'm not fearful of death, because things are going, I don't know, like in the past 3 years, I've been doing the same thing with the same level of stress, same weight, maybe I gained some weight. I'm good. Why should I change? So unless you get some, again, bigger goal than yourself, honestly, like this should be something big, should be something like, okay, if I don't stop, I might not I don't know, like just an example, attend my daughter's wedding. I don't know how important would that be for a person. I don't know. For some people, yeah, it's really important, and that's enough. That's enough. That's really enough to be like, okay, I'm gonna lose the weight. I'm gonna I'm gonna drop some responsibility. Maybe I'm gonna outsource some of the responsibility. I'm gonna be like, no, it's too much. That's yeah. Those are my 2 cents on the situation.
So you mentioned addiction, Ayoub. So one of the things that I've written a lot about, and people can look this up on my website, Sifu, Sifu Slim.com. They can see my book, my first book of nonfiction, which is called Sedentary Nation. So when I asked some people who were around a Swami, a guru from India, who very intelligent person, very elite thinker, and world-renowned expert on the ancient Vedic texts. He said that it's a question of momentum, and momentum is a property of physics. So when you have a forward momentum on something, you just have to keep that going. So this athlete from Egypt, he didn't have to keep going at 5 hours a day of training and playing and massage and physical therapy and diet. He didn't have to do 5 hours. All he had to do was 40 minutes to an hour and a half and keep that going for the rest of his life and be around coaches, be around other people that were maintaining themselves and do some stretching with his wife. But in his culture, he does one thing, and his mind, his philosophy, he does one thing, and then you leave that and you become something else. You don't take the good things you learn from your former life, like high performance athletics is not really good for you. You abuse your body. It's too demanding on your heart, too demanding on your brain, and too demanding on your family. It's just too hard. So you don't take the bad stuff with that forward. What you do is you take the good stuff, which means the wellness aspects, the physical aspects, the camaraderie with other people, the learning, the sharing, the teamwork. You take that with you, and you can use that all in business, your life, and your spiritual community. You can use all that stuff for the rest of your life. But he didn't do that. He chose to take his next thing, advancing his education, getting jobs, working harder. So instead of 7 hours and being balanced and doing some sports and physical activity and hanging out with friends, he said, I'm going to work. I'm going to go from 8 hours to 9 hours to 12 to 15. I'm going to buy more stuff, accumulate more stuff that needs my responsibility. So his balance was compromised as an athlete and as a person who was no longer an athlete. It was compromised. His balance was compromised. So he lost momentum, and at the same time, he compromised his balance. And of course, addiction comes into play because you can't stop addiction. It's very hard to stop. That's in our neurology, it's in our stress, it's deep in our unconscious mind, and it becomes part of our life, and it actually becomes a comfort. You mentioned the word comfort, Ayoub. It becomes comforting to us. And one of the first big gems of wisdom I came up with in my book, The Sedentary Nation, which I spent 4.5 years on, and I had to read that thing when it was done 110 times and edit it. I think I edited it, each of those 110 times you're editing a little bit with professional editors. I probably did 20 professional edits on that thing to get it to where it needed to be. But it shows you I was compromised at that time I wrote it, because I had to do 2 jobs and I was writing 2 books at that same time, and then doing all of my sports and wellness and had a girlfriend, blah, blah, blah. So it's not easy to maintain balance when you're doing demanding things, and life is very demanding. But this is the thing that I'm preaching. Balance has to be maintained, and then addiction won't creep in. But if you get this balanced, then addiction creeps in. And if you get addicted, then it creates more imbalance. It's just a vicious cycle. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Ayoub.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like one of the easiest way to get addicted to something, whatever, it's unbalance, and unbalance creates stress. So stress is like the easiest thing that will make you basically relapse. So if you want to relapse, if let's say you have a drinking problem and you really want to relapse, yeah, I'm saying that, yeah, just get stressed at work. Yeah, easiest way. One of the things that I do when I work with my clients is, okay, let me look at your routine and let's manage each source of stress. Let's look at it. Why does it get you stressed? Why? Like, could you do it this way? Could you do it that way? And from that, I mean, because it's not like, let me use video games as an example. You start playing video games, you enjoy video games. When you continue, you play not because you enjoy it. You play because otherwise you feel miserable, which is different from enjoying it. And the third phase is I'm playing, but I don't even know why I'm playing. And it works with everything. Like, I'm pretty sure the first time that people try a drug, it's fun. I never do drugs, but I can think about it, right? I think the first times are like, wow, this is new, this is fun. But then the fun ends because for our brain is really like, it's a machine, right? It's a pattern recognition machine. So after 2, 3, I don't know how many times you give it something, it's like, this is normal. Like, are you giving me this? Like, I know this already, right? And then as stress increases, as responsibility increases, and of course, like, if you never learn how to deal with your emotional state, then the easiest option is to numb the emotion. So how do you numb it? You use substances, you use you go to the internet maybe and you watch some type of content, which I will not mention to not get a strike on YouTube. And yeah, so you do that. And of course, like, one of the features of addiction is it's a really tricky feature, which I mentioned in one of my latest tweets, which is basically take a basic human need, hijack it, make it super accessible, give it to people. That's how you create an addiction, basically. So why do people get addicted to video games? Because people like progress. And since our brain doesn't really recognize the difference between reality and fiction, if you're making progress in a video game, that's positive for your brain. It looks at it as you are making progress. But why should I work on my business when I can make progress on a video game, right? Like, our problem is that we say, oh, it should be clear. No, it's not clear, because for the brain, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. If this takes me less effort and I'm going to make more progress, which again is like dopamine, I'm gonna take the less effort option because that's the optimal choice. It's really the optimal choice. In theory, of course, then in practice, we know the effects. Like, it's clear. That's why we need a bigger mission. When you have a bigger mission, you are able to give up your vice. But if you don't have it, then why should you give it up? It's an optimal choice. It's the wrong choice, but it's the optimal one. Evolutionarily speaking, you're getting the most progress. That's how it works. Unfortunately, our brain is like incredible. It's it's really incredible, but when someone understands it, he can use those same mechanisms against it. So why should you get rejected by a girl when you can go on the internet and do whatever you want to do? Why should you get rejected?
Yeah.
Why should you put in the effort, right? And then we know the consequences, but yeah.
Yes, I was thinking when you were talking, Ayoub, about video games, and it occurred to me that yes, the biochemistry, yes, the neurology is being fired. Different hormones are being released, like dopamine. And yes, it's giving you fear a little bit, and then overcoming fear if you're doing well in this war type game, let's say, with your friends. You're also getting connection with people all around the world. And if you don't know them very well, it's not a negative connection because you don't see these people on a regular basis in terms of your friend that you can touch, where you may have a disagreement and two boys may fight each other from time to time. Then they're friends and then they fight each other. Then they're taking one girl and then they say the wrong thing about another girl at school behind your back. It's, human relationships, especially with adolescents and young boys and young girls, it's very challenging, right? So there's a lot of difficulty in those relationships. But when my generation before video existed, we went right back in there to those relationships, and we had a group of people that might have been 5, 10, or 15 or 20 people, and people were always on the outs, meaning we were mad at that. Many of us were mad at that one person, and then that person might regroup and come back, and they were developed a little bit differently in their behavior, and then we accepted them back into the group. Some people, just like a kingdom, we banished that person to never return, or sometimes that person may have moved away, and so people came and went in that group. But with this video game, you get comfort in the fact that all those things I just mentioned, and in the biochemistry and neurology, but you also get comfort in the fact that you're delaying leaving your room, your school cubicle, if you're at a university or something, or a private school. You're staying safe and comfortable in that thing instead of going over and doing your homework, going out and mowing the lawn, going out and helping somebody, or having to go across the town to go do something that you have to do, or go buy something, or to get your phone fixed. I have always, it seems, computer and phone things I have to go take care of. I don't look forward to those things at all, going and waiting in line at Best Buy and talking to people who are really busy and may be tired and are going to school at the same time and have their own problems. And I come in and I want 20 minutes of their time fully attentive to me. And so that's a hard thing for me. It's a hard thing for them. And then I got to fight traffic sometimes to get there. And I'm fearful that I don't know if they can fix that problem. So this is just normal first world living. And it's a problem. In the third world, they're worried about safe water. They may be worried about invasion. They may be worried about disease. They may be worried about their dictator that's coming through and it takes some people and put them in the military or jail. So third world, second world, first world, all these different problems. But the video game person, if they stay in that comfortable zone, one of the reasons I think that they're doing that is so they don't have to go out and face the next thing that they have to face. Your thoughts, Ayoub?
Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely right. Like I think the key word is it's not video games, it's not alcohol, it's not weed, it's escapism. I think that's the keyword. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't really matter what's the addiction is called. At the end of the day, we are escaping from something. That's what we are doing. That's the constant, the recurring pattern is escaping from something. But again, our little brain, our super brain, doesn't care. Maximum reward, minimum effort, I'm taking that. So it's more on us to kind of train our brain to understand that even though I can play video games, this other thing is just it's just too important.
Yeah.
I would like to play video games, let's say, but this other thing on the right is it's too big. It's too big to miss out.
Yeah.
I'm going to regret it.
I don't know how to raise a child in the last 20 years related to their addictions or their use of a computer and a phone and some of the games that you purchase to use on the big screen TV. I don't know how to do that. I really don't. I know one contact of mine, he had a son, who was doing well in school. He was leading in 2 or 3 classes and doing well in the other classes, and he was doing his physical education well, and he did his home chores well. So he gave this his son at age 7 or 8, and maybe he did that afterwards, but I only know from that period of time. He gave his child, his son, time to play an hour or an hour and a half of video games. And if he did really well, he'd give him 2 or 3 hours in the evening. If he'd get all A's on all of his classes, he'd get a reward. So that's what he did. And, I would love to hear comments from people who have been around young people and who are gamers. And they're not only young people, they're 50-year-old and probably older people who play digital entertainment type things. I know a lot of people who are older who do gambling, online gambling, and that type of thing. But I'd like to hear more about this use of the computer. Is it an addiction? One of the things I talk about in Sedentary Nation is that if it's detrimental to you or others around you and you can't stop doing it, and it's keeping you from things that you should be doing on a regular basis, then it obviously is an addiction in my definition of an addiction. So those are some of my thoughts around that. I don't know how to handle it. I've seen people say no phones, no computers, raise you like it was 1950. And when you're out on your own at 18 or 22, then you can do what you want. But for right now in this house, you're not going to do any of that stuff. And we're going to do whatever. A lot of these people tend to be in a religious group that do that. But I would guess that's less than 1% of people in America who are doing something like that. Most people are going with the flow and saying, do your work. I've got my work. Take it easy on the video games. Take it easy on the addictions. And they're doing the best they can with their own stuff and hoping that the kid turns out right. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Ayoub.
I mean, I used to play a lot of video games when I was younger, but it was basically due to boredom. I will be honest. And the point is, if you study video games, how they work and how the brain develops, I would really suggest for young people to never touch it. But for a simple reason, to be honest. Like, your brain is in the development phase, right? And you are training your brain with that excessive release of dopamine. So that's like the perfect recipe, because what happens when you play video game is that your amygdala shuts down. So why? I mean, you probably saw it a lot of times. Like, let's say we are at a restaurant and there are the parents and the kid starts crying. Why does the kid stop crying the moment he has he's playing the video game? Because the amygdala it shuts down. But the problem with that is that our ability to learn is directly related to our amygdala, because our amygdala signals to our, let's say, frontal cortex, okay, this move was good. This move was bad because it was painful. But if I cannot feel pain, how can I learn? So you hinder his ability to learn, basically, while his brain is developing. Two things we are doing. Yeah. Really wrong, just in my opinion, and from even a scientific point of view. So I will be not in the 1%, in the 0.001%, in which I would say, you know what? You don't play video games. You want to use social media. You produce on social media. You don't consume. You produce, because that's another big problem of today. We are big consumers, but we don't produce. We just consume passively. Yeah. But we are not the ones that are creating the book, creating the tweet, creating the thread. We just consume it. And when you just consume, you lose, with time, you lose your ability to be creative, because you got used to a passive state. The observer, I call it the observer, which is a phenomenon that unfortunately happens in another thing that I cannot say due to YouTube policies. But basically, they are training us to be observers and not active, actors. And that, of course, creates a lot of big problems. Maybe when people get married, then during their life, they saw a bunch of stuff, and then they have, maybe some things that they may like, but it was created due to a consumption that went out of control, which could be in video games, which could be in movies, which could be many things. And then you may have like someone say, no, those were his predispositions. I mean, I would argue that take one person that never saw something and take a person that got accustomed to that something. And let's use the same principle. My brain doesn't know the difference between fiction and reality. So if I train it with fiction is going to become reality. I'm sorry. That's what it happens.
That was wonderful, Ayoub. So yeah, for the people out there who want to take the first step is the why. Why do you want to do this? Well, you know that sitting down all day or most of the day is not good for your health. Mind, body, spirit, it's not good for you. It takes all that energy and it shuts it down. So that's a really big problem. I come from a family where we don't have a big, strong muscle and fat butt. So when I sit, the pointy part of the bottom of my bones and my sits bones, S-I-T-Z, named after someone named Sitz, all of these things will pierce down into my nerves and my tissue and even into my skin because I don't have this much stuff. I have this much tissue between the bone and the end. So when I fall on the ice playing hockey or on the sidewalk, I really get a jolt from that. I mean, it's not good for any of us to fall on hard surfaces. Football players get hurt all the time just by falling, even without somebody landing on it, just falling on that hard, cold surface or on the AstroTurf surface or in training on a gym floor. It's very hard on the body. Now you're sitting all the time and you're taking these bones and you're piercing your tissue. So you know that's not good for you. So why do you do it? So read Sedentary Nation and 1 chapter a week and learn about that. And if you still, at the end of that, have a problem with motivation to get out of your seat and go do something, then you should have a coach. And Ayoub and I are coaches, and we'll work with you on that. We'll be good listeners. We'll provide baby steps if you need some baby steps. We'll be your accountability person. We'll be your empowerment person. All those things. That's a normal way that tribal people have lived for hundreds of thousands of years. The older lions teach the younger lions how to hunt, how to live, how to survive, how to defend. That's what we're here for, to share in this learning. And if you're stuck, that means you haven't learned the how, the why, the what, the how to regroup, how to be balanced, all these things. And you've got to learn those things. And yes, we are suggesting that you're deficient if you're stuck in that thing and you're just laughing it off saying, yeah, I really love my video games. Yeah, I really love my big sugary drinks. Yeah, I love just talking to people endlessly all day long on phone and Instagram and Facebook Messenger and FaceTime and all these things, because you're not doing anything. You're just talking all day. That's another addiction. And I know a lot of people who do that. They just can't stop talking and interacting with people, and they're not reaching their goals. And if they want to be like people have taught me to be, learning and doing the right thing, if they're not doing those two things, they're stuck and they need help. Your turn.
Yeah, I mean that's absolutely right. But I think basically what happens is I don't know if you ever heard this I don't know like the specific name, but there is an experiment basically in which they put a frog in boiling water. Of course, the temperature increases bit by bit.
Yes.
And what happens basically, it's because we are creatures of habit, right?
Yep.
Habits are created because they are efficient. So if you needed to think about every step that we would need to take, basically our willpower will be finished in 30 minutes. So habits come in handy because you can do something automatical, because maybe you see a cue and you know from that cue, it's like a circuit, right? I see the cue, my brain goes, yep, I'm gonna do A, B, and C and D in succession because I know that it's a circuit. It's ingrained in me. It's ingrained in my brain. So the problem, as we said before, with comfort is that if I get there gradually, I don't need to move from here because it took me a lot of time to get there. And the same way with the frog, like if you throw the frog and the temperature is already high, the frog is gonna jump out. But if you leave it there where the temperature is good, and then you start raising the temperature bit by bit by bit by bit by bit, the frog is gonna stay there because the little change is not it's not felt. Basically, the change is not felt. It's like stress, right? Stress is tricky because unless you are like constantly monitoring your level of stress, you only feel stress at the end when the temperature is already too high. And the same, I think it works the same with comfort. Basically, when you got used to a sedentary life, the Coca-Cola, the French fries, the sofa, the Netflix, that's who you are. So again, as you said, if you don't have a bigger why, for your brain, that's the optimal choice. Again, that's the optimal choice. So you need, as you got there, you need to revert back. Of course, there are a lot of things that can be done, but again, without a first why, we don't have a why to start. That's the point. We don't. And without that, it's really, I would say, even useless to start, because we're gonna stay there eventually. Like we're gonna maybe do some improvements, but again, without the why, I'm gonna get back to what took me 20 years to build, the sedentary lifestyle of getting heavier week by week by week, and enjoying, but not really enjoying my French fries. That's what happens.
Yeah, the frog in the hot pot that started out normal temperature and it keeps increasing. So I mentioned before this line of there is comfort in the discomfort. Now, I think we should save that for a next conversation, either the following week or another week, because I have a lot to say on that, and we've probably gone on enough today to satisfy what we attempted to accomplish. So why don't we communicate via our email system, and we'll come up with a plan for the next conversation.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That's a really big topic, and it links really well with addictions as well, with the why, with the pain pleasure balance, and all those really interesting topics. So yeah, I think it would need his own episode. I think that's a great idea.
So Ayoub and I, at least if he's of the opinion when he watches Robert Sapolsky on YouTube, why don't you folks use this conversation that we've just shared as an introduction to a few things. Some of my books, some of Ayoub's coaching, some of my coaching, and a chance to examine the discussions and the teaching. Some of his lectures are on YouTube, of Robert Sapolsky at Stanford. And I'll put a link down below of one of the videos that may change your life about what you think about dominant male behavior and the abusive dominant male behavior. And I think it's the most pivotal video in the history of relationships, animal and human relationships ever produced. And if you see something that's more compelling than this one, I would love to see it, and put that down in the comments. But let's run some of your time by some of the things that we've shared and the resources we provided, and Robert Sapolsky at Stanford. And if you like this kind of stuff and you want to advance in your learning and in testing your hypotheses, keep going on that path. Keep learning more, but don't stop moving your physical body, and don't stop helping people. Don't stop eating right and doing all these other things, doing well at your job. Keep balance in all of these things, and keep on that journey that we're inviting you to join us on. Any last words, Ayoub?
I think you summarized it really well. So I will leave it at that. And yeah, and thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom. And we will talk soon.
Great, brother. Have a wonderful week.